Hello everyone, Praisedscooter here. And I'm going to keep things short and sweet with you this year. I haven't had a lot of time to brainstorm a haha funny because there were a lot of games that I was anticipating this year that released so close to the end of the year that I just have not had time to complete them all. I have been in a bit of a mad dash to get everything set up and squared away to make this top 10 video for 2024. Personal life speaking, 2024 was about reconnecting. I had just lost my job, which was a third shift position, and needed to reacquaint myself with the real world and its normal hours. Everything leading up to spring this year, I had very little contact with friends and or family, simply because I was waking up when the world was going to sleep. And me being able to do anything with anyone left me with one of two options. Either see people and hang out with them for about 2 hours out of the day, and then I go to sleep, or I pull an all-nighter, which would have me equally as difficult to deal with due to the delirium caused by a lack of sleep. So I've been trying, and failing, to reconnect with everyone I was forced to distance myself from for about 2 years. And that disconnect also extended to you, the viewer. Every video you have seen this year, and even a couple of the videos that are coming out next year, were all recorded during the first 3 months or prior of this year. I was done with Tears of the Kingdom in April. Like the whole shebang. Recording, editing, everything. And the current running series of Splatoon 3 Side Order and the upcoming series were recorded before I was done with Tears of the Kingdom. So I'm apologizing to you as well. Because while I have kept up with my 1 video per day minimum guarantee, I was so wrapped up in my work that I didn't stop to think that I wouldn't be able to get any real-time feedback from you guys that would help make any series better. Anyway, my sappy story aside, gaming seemed to have this very big lull in the middle of the year. Like an 8-month long gap where just nothing or very little was coming out. We got a couple big hits between January and February, and then nothing. Not a peep. Silence. Until September, when everyone and their pet frog dropped the biggest releases they've ever hit the world with in the last 3 years. And that burst of releases has put a time crunch on me and mildly adjusted how I'm going to do my list this year. I have played a lot of the games you'll be seeing on this list, but there's a good chance I haven't finished the game in question. So this list is a little skewed, as this is as far as I can make it into my backloggery before I have to start pulling all-weekers instead of all-nighters to get this video done in time. But the same statement I make for these top 10 videos remains the same. This is my personal list. This is not an end-all, be-all list that everyone needs to abide by. If your favorite games this year aren't on this list, then we have to agree to disagree. With all that said, let's get into my top 10 games from 2024. Before we get to the actual top 10 games, I have a few honorable mentions. These are games that I played this year that I either didn't have enough time to justify putting them in the top 10 list itself, they flat out didn't make the cut, or were released in the previous year and I only had the chance to play them this year for the first time. My first honorable mention goes to Princess Peach Showtime. It has been nearly 20 years since Peach was given a chance to be the leading lady. And Showtime lets her do exactly that. Be the leading lady of this play that is this game. This game plays into the whole stage play motif excellently, with stage pieces, costume changes to be different power-ups from other Mario-centric games, and the whole adventure revolving around the life of a theater. Much like the aforementioned Super Princess Peach Showtime suffers a bit from holding the hand of the player a little too hard at times, and the very slow pacing. There is some retribution in this when you can revisit levels for another form of collectible and challenge modes on bosses, but it's pretty far in and is only like 15% of the total game's runtime. Another honorable mention goes to Gravity Circuit, a game that clearly pulls a lot of its inspiration from Mega Man X4 onward, where you are playing as Zero. But that's where the similarities will stop. Kai moves about the world with a grapple hook designed to let him swing from ceilings to let him move much faster, and also to grab defeated enemies to throw at other enemies to chain together KOs. But also, Kai can be customized to your playstyle to maximize your movement. I personally stuck with a mostly vanilla kit, but you can boost your movement speed, give yourself a double jump, hit one-hit shields, shadow clones, grenades, shoryukens, pile drivers. The list goes on and grows with each circuit holder defeated. It's the Mega Man X you never knew existed, set to speed 11. Another honorable mention on this list goes to Power Stone, a fighting game that bases most of its movesets based on scenery or opponent location context, and very little on the quarter circles you know how to input. It is Capcom taking their fighting game prowess and dialing it back a little bit so the casual crowd can hop in and have fun with the game. Quite similar to how a lot of the fighting game community currently views the Super Smash Bros. Series of games. It's not a super complex fighting game, but sometimes you need a dumb fighting game to balance out the touch of death games that require more equations than a set of calculus homework. And the final honorable mention goes to Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore. This one is purely to the concept of this game, that it is a game that was made purely because of the success of the YouTube poop genre of videos on this social media platform. This game is a Philips CDI game, down to the name of the company who made the game, having their company name be a wordplay pun on CDI. The cutscenes look like they were slapped together by 5 different artists forced to work in Microsoft Paint with writing that would make the terminally online shrivel up in their chairs from the amount of cringe exuding from the game. Even 90% of the cast of voice actors and programmers who worked on the original Zelda CDI games are here. The difference is they were given time to make the game functional and playable instead of a quick cash grab at having a prolific IP in their corner. And I am excited to see more of what this game has to offer once I do have the chance to play more than an hour of it. And that's all for the honorable mentions. Let's now move on to the actual top 10 games from this year. Number 10. My number 10 pick for 2024 goes to Yars Rising. Yars Rising is an explorative platformer, which most folks will call a Metroidvania, that pulls many of its inspirations from Atari intellectual properties. For anyone born after Apple was known more for phones and music players instead of Microsoft's direct competitor, Atari was the grandpappy to everything video games as we know it. The main character, codenamed Yar, is an intelligence broker who is going undercover at Kotek in order to get information from the tech giant to give to a competitor to cash a big paycheck. Unfortunately for her, her headstrong nature gets her caught at the 11th hour and locked up in the company's holding cells. Why a tech company has a jail cell is not something to think too much about. As you proceed through the game, you'll go through this strange but well-executed multi-genre mashup that makes sense considering Yar's profession. Certain portions of the game you'll be sneaking through hallways, dodging super soldiers, and crawling through ventilation systems, where getting hit once makes you lose 45% of your health and resets you back to the start of the room. That does sound a bit harsh on paper, but even someone who is challenged at stealth gameplay can breeze through this section of the game, albeit very slowly as I study the enemy patrol paths for the 7th time. Then the segments that folks are more familiar with in this type of game, the platforming shooter, where you run and jump through increasingly difficult sections of the game, shooting laser blasts and rockets to destroy enemies and doors. If you played Metroid or any of the newer style Castlevania games, you know exactly what you're getting here. Get a thing to make a previous hard section of the game trivial, and get to a new hard area. And lastly is the hacking gameplay, which I would just call whoops all the minigames. Now, all these hacking sections have an anchoring point of controlling a spaceship modeled after the titular intellectual property, Yars. But your end goal is different almost every single time you initiate a hack. Destroy certain objects, break a protective barrier, survive for X amount of seconds, and you can retry these hacking minigames as often as you like, barring you have the health pool to warrant your multiple failed attempts. And these minigames aren't just for fun little distractions, as they do many things for Yar that help her with her adventure. From unlocking doors, to giving you augments, to adjusting your character how you want. Additional health, more missiles, even something as minor as allowing you to see the names of the music tracks playing in the game, so you can come back around in your own time and listen to the tracks after the fact. Most of the bosses in this game are all callbacks to those previously mentioned Atari intellectual properties. Not only just our titular character, but the boss you're seeing on screen is Black Widow, a very popular arcade game published by Atari back in the day. The writing in this game feels like it was something out of a Saturday morning cartoon. Cheesy, strange pacing, so many love triangle tropes. Hang on just a minute. Who made this game? Son of a... Well, that may explain why I like this game so much. Yars Rising is a unique beast that allows old farts like myself to relive a handful of their original gaming introductions, reimagined in a new way, while giving the younger audiences a unique explorative platformer with a lot of character and charm that is not there in a lot of current games. Number 9. Hey, do you like the Super Nintendo hit game Yoshi's Island? Do you like Super Smash Bros? What if both of those things existed in the same place? My number 9 entry is Declines Drops, a game made mostly by one person that took things they like about their inspirations to get into game development and slapped them all together in a cute hand-drawn art style. The major goal of the game is to, effectively, stop the industrialization of the planet. You do this by flexing your platform fighting game knowledge and your combo knowledge against the enemies of varying sizes, skill, and tactics. But much like the hashed together intro for this segment stated, you'll be using your knowledge of platformers to get various collectibles and gather coins to buy permanent upgrades at Sergei's shop. And honestly, I don't have much more to talk about on this game. It's just a great combination of a handful of genres that have been expertly crafted together that would make a master of either of these combined genres enjoy their time. Number 8. My number 8 entry for 2024 is a new entry in a series of games that fans thought was going to be a long-dead gem. Mario & Luigi Brothership. Mario & Luigi Brothership is a grand return to this series that many folks used as their bridging point into the turn-based RPG genre. And this specific entry may do that once again. This game is also the first major title that Kevin Afghani has at taking over the titular brothers. With that much beloved Italian gibberish showing his skills, the brothers have never sounded better. The plot of this game, from what I have been able to tackle so far, is Mario and Luigi being mysteriously transported away to a faraway land where the major source of energy of the lands has been destroyed. Connie, our surrogate captain and plot-driving character, is a botanist who has tasked herself with not only rebuilding the Unitree, but also reconnecting the now scattered islands. Happening upon Mario and Luigi is a happy accident that made her task all the easier. These islands that I've mentioned, it's actually a nice way to break up the gameplay and various areas of the game in a different way than most RPG games will do. Even as earlier entries in the series are guilty of this, but these largely separated islands almost call back to the main games with stage-based levels. As in, Island 1 will always have level 1 through 3 enemies unless plot changes happen, where Island 2 will have a different batch of enemies with their own level ranges, and getting to the end of this island's progression will link back to the titular Brothership. And when this happens, a slew of things happen that RPG fans both love and unfortunately dread. Upon returning to the Brothership, the island you just visited will have additional paths open up, enticing you to revisit it to collect various collectibles and gear. Things you do to avoid spending additional money that you save for those super items at the end of the game. But you can also do side quests that have those same bits of gear as well. While you're doing all this, the Brothership is sailing the seas, and constantly moving while doing so, even when you're in battle. So there's a little bit of a time management system to play around with that challenges your ability to be efficient in both battle and exploration. In battle, all of the brothers' attacks feel like bros attacks, hitting multiple buttons for each brother's attack to succeed. And failing those inputs at any point does have a unique animation for each brother at each portion of the attack. And the bros attacks I'm comparing it to are also back. And even though the vessel for those attacks looks the same, they have different aspects to them. For where I am at in the game with the first bros attacks, which is just a red shell and a green shell, they look the same, but are functionally different. Mario's red shell is a single target attack that deals massive damage to one creature, whereas Luigi's green shell is a spread damage monster dealing damage to multiple enemies at once. And in most instances, this widespread damage will defeat 7 enemies at once from full health. And focusing on Luigi, Luigi feels like the star of the show this time, whereas Mario is more the vessel for the player. Luigi has a unique mechanic very bluntly called Luigi Logic. Luigi will fail upwards into many activities. Some activities are very simple, like collecting green coins, plucking plants, smashing boxes with a hammer, etc. Some are Luigi figuring out that the bros need to stop holding hands long enough to build a bridge forward to progress. And this logic even extends to boss fights, where Luigi figures out a way to break the boss's defenses to allow the bros to deal an exorbitant amount of damage all at once. And again, this Luigi's logic system in battle has Luigi failing upwards. And you, as Mario, have to find a way to counteract Luigi's short-sighted portions of his plans. This game is oozing so much charm and has so many ideas that I think has been missing from this series since Alpha Dream had been tasked with remaking games that arguably didn't really need to be remakes in the first place.
Number 7.
My number 7 entry is The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. After so many years, we finally have a game where Zelda gets to be the one to save the day. And despite what I had said earlier on, those games do not count. With Zelda at the helm, the game's overall pace changes drastically. Where Link is normally going into most scenarios sword flying wildly, when playing as Zelda, you need to assess the situation from afar and figure out the best way to approach the task. And this applies to both combat and puzzles. For combat, you see what types of enemies you are facing down and see what their counters are and use that against them. You also have the ability to hold enemies in place for a short period of time to make the combat a little easier, but it puts you as the player in more of a passive role. I would almost attribute it to like playing the Pikmin games. You do have the option to take things in a more direct approach, but the best case scenario on that is an emergency situation that lasts about 10 seconds at most. Kind of like a Starman in the Mario games, but with the risk of still falling in combat if you get too reckless. The puzzle aspect of the game is kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, everything is designed in parts where the echoes you learn in the tutorial dungeon should be all you need to complete every puzzle up to portion 1 of the main quest to complete. If you learn everything possible, it makes it easier, but you also only use the same 5 to 6 echoes to traverse Hyrule. This more relaxed playstyle is unfortunately promoted by the game's sorting system, and how you can really only see your most commonly used echoes on the default selection, and only 5 of them at a time unless you do scroll through everything. And considering there is more than likely 700 plus echoes in this game, you're more likely just going to find your favorites and call it a day. But back to more positive things. I love that this game went with the Playmobil-looking Link's Awakening remake art style, and that helps promote that childlike builder's intuition to keep pushing things together until something works, or in some cases, breaks horribly. And it is also wonderful to see these smaller scale takes on the various tribes in the land of Hyrule, and all of them are represented. Even the 2 different types of Zoras that have been changing hands constantly in between Zelda games. The game is also open world, so those that have been enjoying the open feeling Zelda games have had in the last decade will be free to spread their wings and just go where they want. It has been a blessing and a curse for me because I keep getting distracted with seeing if I can find a ceiling to the world by building myself up to the top of a tree line and then jumping up from that same tree line. I personally have a very strong conviction with this game to gather every single echo that is available, and I fear my time coming in the game may drive me insane.
Number 6.
My number 6 entry for this year goes to Splatoon 3's Side Order DLC. What? If an award ceremony can shoehorn in DLC for their Game of the Year, so can I. Side Order took Splatoon and turned it into a roguelike. And in true Splatoon fashion, this mode starts off hard, gets laughably easy, and then has one final challenge that makes my hair stand on end out of pure anger. Well, it normally would if the permanent buffs in all roguelites overrode any challenge that this would present. Let's rewind things a bit. Each Splatoon game ends with a major PvP event that dictates the theme or story of the next game in the series. Splatoon 1 dictated that Callie would be brainwashed by DJ Octavio, and Splatoon 2 led us in the direction that Splatoon 3 would be put in a chaotic Mad Max style wasteland. But with this DLC, the dev team were able to give us a tangible what if for if things had gone in the other direction. And I love that because game dev planning for a sequel happens pretty much 3 days after a game goes gold, meaning that nothing was left behind and no planned assets had gone to waste, that we are aware of. No one tells all their secrets. The major pull for me that made me enjoy this DLC was that every weapon type, no matter how bad you are with that weapon type, has skills that can be selected to compensate for your lack of skill in an aspect of a weapon. You always seem to find yourself running out of ink? Pick up the ink refill on Splat's perk. Have horrible potato aim with the charger? Pick up the homing shots perk so that if you aim in the same area code of the enemy, you'll hit that sweet spot every time. And there's many other combinations to try out with each weapon having a specific set of perks that the game will offer to you 90% of the time. And these perks that I've been rambling on about break the game in varying ways. You can become so incredibly lucky that enemies just empty their pockets for you and take themselves out. You can make your explosion radius so large that you're hitting enemies on the next floor of the tower. You become a mascot, and let the real star of the show, the Pearl Drone, take care of your light work from the word go. It's just such a fun way to take the established formula of the base game, flip it on its head, to the point that you're trying to find ways to break the game's code.
Number 5.
My number 5 pick for this year goes to Penny's Big Breakaway. Penny's Big Breakaway is what happens when a collection of gamers and developers obsessed with a blue rodent finally get the chance to break away entirely from that cage and make their own thing. The dev team in question being the minds behind Sonic Mania. Penny is a busking artist, doing anything she can to find her big break in show business. It's just a bit unfortunate that she's trying to do this in a city full of performers ruled by a king renowned for his performance skills in the past. On her way to a talent contest, Penny finds a magical yo-yo that has a will of its own. And this yo-yo is a fan of chaos. This yo-yo is a big fan of chaos, and proceeds to embarrass the king of this country, and gives Penny all the attention she ever wanted, as the country's most wanted criminal. The game itself is a bit deceptive of what it wants to be at times. Initially, you would think it's a simple 3D platformer, but using a combination of 3 buttons becomes a challenge to complete each level in under 2 minutes while doing a mixed up series of tricks and flips to keep a combo going for the highest score possible and get the highest rank at the end of the stage. And with this series of tricks and flips, you can do the impossible at times. Fly nearly forever, surf across the surface of the water for nearly infinite time. What I enjoy about the game the most is the presentation. How all the way through, this looks like a fever dream game that came from the weird world of the Sega Saturn, in both aesthetic choice and graphical appearance, and also the music. A lot of the tracks in this game are quite amazing, but it all comes to a head with the Final Worlds track that has a big band sound behind it with some 90s drums and a one-word vocal sample. It's the closest I've come to saying a game plays like the Sonic games I remember fondly, without the game in question being an actual Sonic title.
Number 4.
My number 4 pick for this year is the biggest party around, Super Mario Party Jamboree. Jamboree is something that has been what we've been hoping would happen in time with this series. It's a culmination of what the last 2 to 3 games in the series have been trying to do, finding that spark of joy from the original Mario Party entries. And we now have the best parts of all of those games in one spot. The original Super Mario Party gave us an enormous roster, but with limited movement speed, with smaller dice values. Superstars fixed the movement and the board selection issues by giving us classic boards, but they also took away all of the new types of boards and most of the new cast for this entry. And now, we have it all in one spot, as a combination of everything good and then some. We have a massive roster of playable characters, boards old and new, that have their own gimmicks specific to each board. This includes the board that is clearly labeled as the tutorial board. Unlike some of the other games in the series, we have online play available from the start, and it is such a welcome change to have that there without waiting for the game's launch period of life to peter out and die to get online play. And there is even a ranking system of sorts for those of you who want to attempt to go Diamond 3. There are a handful of modes that don't work with this online play, which is understandable because how do you make a rhythm game work online? Heck, even the rhythm game that you can play online is borked at best. But the modes that need multiple human players to be completable all have an online component that allows you to finish all the tasks in the game. Speaking of these various modes, one of my favorite additions has to be the Bowser Kaboom Squad mode, where up to 8 people can play together in this boss raid of a mode and work together to take on and defeat the imposter Bowser. And having the rare opportunity to play this mode with 7 other human players, yes, it is probably some of the most fun I've had with a Mario Party mode since the Koopathlon was introduced in one of the 3DS titles, which that mode has also made a comeback. Bowser Kaboom City, with anything less than 4 players though, is rough at best, and you'll be barely squeaking out victories. And also, you can't play as Bowser when playing Bowser Kaboom City for some reason, even though it is clearly established that this is a fake and imposter Bowser. Make it make sense, man. The character selection is as vast as it is because of the Jamboree mechanic, where one of the other 10 cast members you didn't pick can be recruited, but you have to play a minigame to earn the right to claim them as a effective second player. These minigames will call out to either common tropes in minigame compilation style games, or play to the character's known interests. Mario has you playing several classic Mario Party style minigames in rapid succession, while Luigi has you playing pinball, and so on. And having that bonus buddy lets you activate everything twice, both positively and negatively. I'm just a fan that there is such a wide array of things you can do, and it feels like there will never be a shortage of things to do in the game if I ever feel like I'm in a Mario Party mood.
Number 3.
My number 3 entry for this year is Anton Blast. Anton Blast to me is Wario Land that has grown up with the players of the games that this title is based on. From a presentation standpoint, the pixelated art style rings out to the animation style that is something from the late 90s and early 2000s, where a lot of things are presented as silly and or gross looking as possible. Everything is grossly exaggerated to draw attention to what is the thing you should be focusing on to time your dodging, or to get the perfect attack window to reach those hard-to-hit portions of the stage. The voice acting and writing are so stellar that it makes every character, even the protagonist, detestable for the sake of comedy. I'm going to butcher this last name. Even Gianni Montegrano, who voices Satan, has nailed the voice so exquisitely that it reminds me of how much I love to hate Mr. Red from the Cow and Chicken cartoon. Gameplay-wise, it is a technical marvel that we would call out to a large-budget studio to make this kind of game. It does what it says on the box, where you jump, ground pound, and shoulder check the world to get your spirits and get out with as much money as you can. But there are also additional technical aspects that will have you running through stages faster and faster to complete time trials and combo challenge variants of the stages to get additional rewards. Even in the normal variations of stages, there are secret collectibles that you can find that you will probably miss if you're just barreling through the stage and not paying attention to subtle clues in the stage's geography that lead to music tracks, miscellaneous treasures, and sprays that have names referencing not only to games that are the inspiration for Anton Blast, but also cartoons that are an influence to this game's animation style. Anton is not here to make friends. He is here to blast expectations of what you expect in a platforming game, and have you set that bar even higher.
Number 2.
I love beat 'em ups. It's my favorite genre in video gaming. So that leads us to my number 2 pick for the year with Zenless Zone Zero. Hoyoverse have come at me with a game that fills a hole left by Dragalia Lost in the gacha game beat 'em up genre, but also has a lot more unique functions with the game that feels like it took pages out of a more fast-paced brawler like Devil May Cry. Let's back it up for a bit and talk about the multifaceted game in its major parts. First off, the obvious thing being a beat 'em up. Well, an RPG beat 'em up. Yes, you do need to pray to the gacha gods to get that one unit you like the look of or the kit of in order to be able to play them in hopes that they slot into your team. But the fun with the RPG side of it is taking those characters you have, combining elements, classes, and factions in the right order in order to have each team member take advantage of their passive buffs, and then giving them their proper booster or weapon engine that will give them the biggest boon to what they do. Like part of the footage you are seeing here, where I have one character give the team an invulnerability buff so the debuffer can come in to do her thing, then have the walking knife juggling act follow up and do a death by 1000 cuts routine. But that RPG aspect of the gameplay doesn't mean you will get a guaranteed victory every time. Dodging attacks, calling in another squad member to parry an attack, afflicting status conditions to stagger an enemy, and building up to an ultimate ability that will swing the tide of battle even further in your favor. And unlike a lot of other games in this genre, every character has a unique combat style to them. When was the last time you saw a bear swinging around a concrete divider like a battle axe? That all aside, this game also has an Atlas game shining point to it of managing a life outside of the core gameplay loop that affects the rest of the core gameplay loop. Managing your video store, which is also your front for your secret business that's actually making all your money, to get the materials to upgrade your units, and building up trust with your recruited characters so they are more effective at combat. And in building up the trust of your allies, you learn the secret side of many characters and find out they're much more than what you see on the surface. like that bear I mentioned earlier. He's actually the accountant for a construction company that is very tired of everyone treating him like a violent beast who only seeks destruction. As it is right now, the weakest point of the game is unfortunately with its overarching story. It's definitely a bare bones work in progress where each faction is a story in itself, but it ties back into the main story that is only being revealed to the player in microscopic chunks that will in time fold into an overarching story. As it sits right now, the plot is the mentor of your player character is the reason these dangerous events are taking place and disrupting the peace of Eridu. We will probably more than likely learn more about this in time, because with a game like this, you can't spill all the tea right away. Before we get to the actual top game for this year for myself, let's take a look back at everything else to see if you can kind of figure out where I'm going with this list. At number 10, it is Yars Rising. At number 9, Declines Drops. Number 8, Mario and Luigi Brothership. Number 7, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Number 6, Splatoon 3 Side Order. Number 5, Penny's Big Breakaway. Number 4, Super Mario Party Jamboree. Number 3, Anton Blast. And number 2, Zenless Zone Zero.
Number 1.
No. Wrong hedgehog. My favorite game from this year is Sonic X Shadow Generations, specifically the Shadow portion of this game. The last time Shadow had his own game, it was not very well received. Arguably the beginning of the downhill slide the Sonic series has had for many a year, excluding a handful of titles. Now let's fast forward to this game, where we step into Shadow's shoes once again and explore his ties to the evil entity Black Doom further and see that Shadow may not be fully Hedgehog. It really didn't dawn on me till I was most of the way through this game that Shadow Generations is just the newest age of Sonic games. Like how classic Sonic is for the Genesis era of Sonic games, and modern Sonic was for everything between Dreamcast and Xbox 360, Shadow is for everything from the Wii forward. Shadow's control scheme is closer to the way Sonic controls in Sonic Forces and Sonic Frontiers, with the boost formula and that awkward double jump. The weirdest part of all this to me is, not only is Shadow extremely competent at this newer control style that only Sonic has shown to be capable of in the past, but everything he does has its own dedicated button. You need to understand how alien that is to me, as someone who grew up in the age of Sonic games where if anything took more than 3 buttons and a joystick to control it, it was not a mainline Sonic title. I had such a huge case of whiplash from this simple concept that I didn't know if I should blame muscle memory that is causing me to flub so many button inputs, or the fact that there is just that many things bound to their own individual buttons. As for the stage selection, it was great to visit many stages from Sonic games that are more memorable than a couple of the choices from the base Sonic Generations selections. But I also had my first exposure to Sunset Vista, and I was impressed by the amount of effort that went into this keynote stage of a game for how mediocre the game was. But I'm also surprised how Sonic Team took an open world format game and turned it into a stage-based platforming challenge with the Chaos Islands. It was equally impressive to see many bosses that were reserved for the supersonic battles turned into cinematic encounters that rewarded clever use of chaos control. The story is actually what blew me away the most. Last time Shadow was given closure, that closure seemed to get ripped away almost immediately from him in the very next game, like some cosmic practical joke that will never let him move on. This story has Shadow confront, find peace with, and ultimately let go of his past in a way that lets him use it as more of a strength rather than a weakness. I loved Sonic Frontiers and Shadow Generations for a multitude of reasons, and if this is the quality Sonic Team are going to take with the series going forward, I will happily call myself a Sonic fan once again, rather than sheepishly say, yeah, I know a bit about the games. And that about sums it all up. Another reminder that my top 10 list is probably different from your top 10 list. And if you want, you can write down your list, opinions on my list, or anything else in the comments section below. As for some of the titles that I'm excited for coming up next year, the sequel to Ultimate Chicken Horse, Ultimate Raccoon Sheep, and Golf with Your Friends 2 are among some of the indie multiplayer titles that I'm excited to see returning. as well as revivals of Double Dragon with Double Dragon Revive, and an HD remaster of Croc Legend of the Gobos are coming. And a surprise for me as well of the first Berserker, Kazan, has my attention. Now at this portion of the video, I'm going to shamelessly shill all my stuff. If you don't care about that stuff, cool, I understand. Nobody wants to hear self-plugging or all that stuff. You're cool, I understand. If you like this video, I do make daily uploads in the traditional Let's Play style, as well as one video a week that highlights an indie game or newer release. You can look around the channel and see if anything that I've made interests you, and subscribe if you want to see more for myself. I do also have various ways to support the channel via Patreon and channel memberships. But these are purely a tip jar mentality. I will never lock away any content behind a paywall, and this is purely a way to throw money at me as a way of saying, good job. But please, only do this if you can handle yourself financially. I don't need anyone going into debt because they wanted me to say their name in a video, which I don't do that in the first place, so you'd be wasting your money if that was your end goal. You can also find me on websites such as Twitter and Blue Sky if you want more behind the scenes looks at videos I'm doing, things I'm working on, anything of that sort, or just random pictures I take. Basically, if I'm on a social platform, it'll be the name you see below the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next top 10 video, where hopefully I'll have more than 4 weeks to plan out and put together a video in this magnitude. You have a great day, everybody, and thanks for watching.